Samson, what's the first image that comes to your brawn? Strength, right? So I even saw Mike back there flexing these muscles. Me too. Yeah. What's that, Aunt Donna? Pushing it over. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I agree. Those are the images that come to my mind too. But one, I don't know why. When I was younger, I was a big Popeye fan. Did everybody watch Popeye? Kids these days don't even know who Popeye was. Yeah, exactly, right? And what was his power? Spinach, right? Absolutely, spinach. Well, there's an episode in there where him and Olive Oyl are Samson and Delilah. And I remember he's got these hair, and he would pull on his hair, and lightning rods would come out of it. And the whole story was, it wasn't exactly the Bible version of Samson, but it was absolutely based on Samson and Popeye. He still got his strength from his spinach can, but that vision comes to my mind. But yeah, things of strength is what I think of when we talk about Samson. So who is the strongest person you've ever seen, or what is the biggest act of strength you've ever witnessed? Okay. Yeah. I witnessed it. I was there. Yeah. So if y'all don't know, Casey Tomlinson is one of the strongest men I've ever met in my life. He is a power lifter. You can tell he's still in great shape. But when he was younger, that man could pull some weight. He had some totals. And I went to quite a few of these meets because I had, at the time, some of you don't know this, I had Powerhouse Gym here in Saginaw. I was the first fitness facility ever in Saginaw. So I knew a lot of strong guys. But that's how Casey and we became great friends through that gym. And he is a strong man even today. But boy, I've watched him pull some weight. It's amazing. And so, but the strongest person I've ever seen in my life, his name is Anthony Clark. And he holds the world record for bench press, or did at the time. It may have been broken now. But when I was at my gym, he owned a powerhouse in Spring, Texas. And this guy is Polynesian, and he came up to do a guest lift. Of course, he was trying to sell supplements. But I watched this man, and it was so... Most people, when they bench press with their under the bar with their hands like this, right? That's how most people do it. He did it reverse grip. Yeah, Carlin, you know what I'm talking about. Have you ever seen anybody for a lot of weight? This man repped five times, 5 repetitions, reverse 515 pounds for 5 times in a row. This dude had a barrel chest, just amazing. He drove up in this giant truck, this giant Ford truck, it's set up about this tall, and he crawls out, and I'm just super excited. I've never met this guy before, and, we talked on the phone, and I was just so excited to meet this guy. Big advertisement for my gym as well. I've had big signs all over town, come meet the strongest man in the world, kind of stuff, and I was just super excited. And this dude, he gets out. Well, he's like this tall, driving this giant truck. But boy, he's huge. And so he comes in and we start talking. I set out his supplements and stuff. He came about 3 hours early before we're going to actually do the lifting part. And he says, man, he goes, I'm hungry. I said, you're hungry? I said, well, let me take you to lunch. So I said, where do you want to go? He goes, Dairy Queen. And we had a Dairy Queen in Saginaw then. So load him up, take him to Dairy Queen, and he gets 2 belt busters. 2. Shoves them suckers down like in no time, along with the fries. I'm like, this is not what I expected. This is not the diet of the strongest man I've ever seen, would have. Anyway, that surprised me. He did it, and then afterwards, I said, well, man, I'm so glad you're here. He said, I'm going to hang out for another hour or so, try to sell some more supplements. And he said, I'm really hungry. What? He goes, yeah, can we go back to Dairy Queen? I said, I'm sure. He gets 2 more belt busters, pounds them suckers, and we go back to the gym. He says goodbye, and I hadn't seen him since. But, boy, I'll tell you, I guess those belt busters work because 5 repetitions at 515 pounds reverse grip is amazing. It was an amazing feat of strength. So feats of strength are what I think about when I think about Samson. But Samson, just a little history, and we all pretty much know the story. And who do we relate him with the most? Samson and, yeah, it's kind of like peas and carrots, like eggs and bacon, like Chuck and Beth, right? What's that? Yeah, let's hope not. Let's hope not. We really don't want to be like Samson and Delilah. That's right. That's right. But the words flow that way. So Samson was a judge. Judges 13 through 16 is where our text takes place today. But I thought, while I was studying for this, I hadn't read Judges, the whole book of Judges, in a really long time. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to study the Judges this week. And there's some great studies in there. And the Israelites, you really learn a lot about them in the Judges. Judges was a time before what? Before kings. Yeah, so there were no kings. So God had put judges in place. And there was a lot of different reasons for judges, but judges were interesting men. Some of them actually performed the job of judge. Samson, not so much. He served as judge for 20 years. But as far as duties of judge, we really don't see a lot about that. So let's look at 13. There are just some things that we're going to pick out. I said the story that we teach the kids the most are what? The Samson and Delilah, and the strength of Samson, and we talk about his strengths of feats of strength, which were, remember? What's that? Okay, yeah, that one. We're going to talk about that a little bit. What else? Yeah, like 1,000 men. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. What other one? Push it down the temple, of course, that one. That's probably the biggest one that we remember. Oh, the gates of the city, right? And carried them? Yeah, there's one more. It's kind of at the first, what's in chapter 14. We'll look at it. It's kind of where the feats are. What's that? His riddles, okay, that's something, yeah. But one that you're missing is he killed the lion with these bare hands. Yeah, and then we'll talk about the story that goes along with that. So really, I think Samson was our first action hero. Was he not? I mean, so if you were to describe Samson, how would you describe him? His physical appearance. I mean, the Bible doesn't, but what have you built up in your mind about his physical appearance? Had a lot of hair, and we'll talk about why that was. What else? Big, muscular guy, yeah? Think he was handsome? Maybe. I kind of get the feeling that he was kind of handsome. Yeah, probably not. Of course, I could never be a Nazirite. I don't think I could have been a Nazirite in my early days. I never did let my hair get all that long when I had hair, and it just didn't last. So yeah, me and being a Nazirite just wouldn't have worked very well. Never went that route. So yes, I think he was probably a handsome guy. Did he like women? Cases. I think he. Some of the things that I read about Samson are really ugly. And one says, and I think you can probably confirm it, but it lists him as a sex addict. And I don't know what the actual definition of that is, but he did love his women. There's no doubt about that. and they were kind of the downfall of him. So these are all the things that we think about. And what value does Samson have in the Bible, and what value do we teach the kids in our stories? Some of you that are elementary school age teachers, what do you teach when you teach Samson besides his strength? It doesn't pay to lie. Yeah. What else? Huh? Okay. Yeah, yeah. So I think my point is we teach the story, but we don't go into all the things that were provided in the Bible about Samson with our kids. So it really is, like I said, it looks like it's full of action. There's all kinds of feats of strength going on, but there's so much more to it. And I think that's what we're going to look at today. So the first thing I want to look at is Samson's parents. I don't think we talk to our kids a whole lot about Samson's parents. So starting in 13, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So if you're reading Judges, you go and you just see that all through that they do bad, a judge redeems them, and then they do bad again. And there's peace for 8 years. There's peace for 40 years. There's peace for 20 years. But then they just continue, like the Israelites have always done, mess up, right? So this starts off again. They had messed up. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Ooh, where have we heard the Philistines before? They are the arch enemy of the Israelites, are they not? Yeah, they are in place a lot. When we talked about David, we talked about the Philistines, right? Now, Samson had already done a little bit of work before David, doing God's work to free the Israelites from the Philistines, but it just didn't completely work out because the Philistines the Israelites, they sinned. So God delivered them into the hands of the Philistines. And then there was a man named Manoah, and he was from Zorah. He was of the Danites, and his wife. We never know Manoah's wife's name. I found that kind of interesting. She was sterile and remained childless. So that also kind of seems to be a theme in the Bible sometimes, isn't it? Is that the women are sterile and God provides an opportunity to procreate and to fulfill his will through this. And so that happens a lot. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are sterile and childless, but you're going to conceive and have a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean, because you will conceive and give birth to a son. No razor may be used on his head, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, set apart to God from birth, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines." So from the very beginning, God has a purpose for Samson, even before he's born, right? I think that's important for us to realize sometimes. God's purpose it's just infinite. We have no way of knowing what his plan is sometimes, but he has a plan. So I think that's a point here that as adults we need to realize that and think about that sometimes in our own lives. So she's gonna have him, and he's going to be a Nazirite. Of course, she goes and tells her husband. It's kind of unbelievable. So the angel of the Lord appeared, and the angel of the Lord does a lot of work on God's behalf, and basically he does it again here. And there's several times in Judges where the angel of the Lord appears. The woman went to her husband and told him, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God, very awesome. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name, But he said to me, you will conceive. And he goes on and she repeats everything that the angel says. Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, O Lord, I beg you, let the man of God you sent to us come again to teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born. So what does that say about Samson's parents? Do we think that they're going to be good parents? Man, I think so too. I think that God picked out some really good parents. Now, God knows how Samson's going to turn out. And I kind of feel sorry for the parents because they're really excited, aren't they? And even though he said that the boy would be a Nazirite, that doesn't seem to put them off at all. It doesn't seem to scare them at all. It seems like a real blessing. Now, the Nazirite rules are in Numbers chapter 6, and we're not going to go through all of those, and there's some debate about that. Chapter 6 verses, let me see here. I marked it just so you could look at it if you wanted to. Chapter 6, 1 through 21 talks about the Nazirite and what the Nazirite rules were. And so it was Nazirites, if you don't know, were set apart for God. It was something they could do to show their absolute separation and devotion to God is what that was all about. And so that's what was going to happen. That is where Samson was going to be, and that's where he was going to rule. Sorry, I lost my place here. So if you want to look at those, that's fine. But that was the reason for it. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. So he wanted to get it right, didn't he? He wanted to raise this son in the right way. So that was the reason for his long hair. So a razor never touched his head, at least at that point, right? We'll keep going here. So she has him, and then there doesn't say a whole lot about his childhood. It kind of goes right up into, he's a young man, but it goes on into I'm sorry. There we go. It goes right on into where he starts being interested in women. So the first thing in chapter 14 says this: Samson went down to the Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. Now, one of the things that was really forbidden, and it was forbidden for all Israelites, was the marriage outside of Israelites, right? How many problems did that cause the Israelites? They continued to do that forever and ever, amen, right? That's that vicious circle. They could not resist women that were outside of being Israelites. So this is going to happen again. He saw that there was a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. So that statement right there kind of tells me a little bit about Samson. He's a spoiled, rotten little brat. Is he not? He doesn't treat his mother and father with any kind of respect. He knows. They've taught him right. He knows he's not supposed to marry a Philistine woman, but what does he say? Get her for me now. So that tells me a whole lot about him. His father and mother, isn't there an acceptable woman among our relatives or among all of our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. So I think there's a couple of things going on here. One, he's a spoiled, rotten brat. And he wants what he wants, right? But God does have a purpose, and he told that purpose to Mom, whatever her name might be, of what the purpose of Samson was going to be. So not only is he being willful and disrespectful to his parents, but God has a hand in his behavior too. I really believe that. His behavior is something I probably would not take kindly to. I'd never talk to my father that way. He's looking like I would. Maybe I did, and I just don't remember. He did find my wife for me, and I've told y'all all that story. And maybe before then I told him, well, I probably did tell him, you're kind of crazy. Because think you can find a woman for me. I can find my own woman. But it didn't work out that way. It worked out that he found my woman. And that's pretty cool. It's worked out fine. So thanks, Dad. Oh, okay, we're going to move on from that. So anyway, he ends up marrying this woman, and it doesn't work out really that well. So let's see. So in verse 10, now his father went down to see the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for bridegrooms. So he's prepared to marry her. When he approved, he was given 30 companions. So I think that was probably kind of like groomsmen. He just had a lot of them. That's kind of how I picture that. And then, being the kind of cocky young man that he is, and I think he feels like he's a little bit smarter than everybody else, he tells this little riddle. If you can give me the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. He replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something to sweet. So let's go back and see where that comes from. So he killed a lion with his bare hands. He broke it open. Yeah. And he goes and he comes back later and he sees in the lion, there's a honeycomb with bees. And he takes honey out and he eats it and he takes them to his parents. So, just kind of a cool thing. I mean, that tells us his strength, for one thing. And he shared with his parents. So maybe he did love his parents. Kind of brought him a gift, because honey wasn't the most common thing at the time. But he goes on, so how could anybody possibly know the answer to this riddle? And he knew that. He thought, I've got one up. Kind of a bet, isn't it? Kind of a gamble. So it tells us some more about his character. He's kind of a gambler. And so he kind of makes this bet, thinking, I've got a surefire win on this. So he gives them that. And for 3 days, they could not give the answer. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. So his groomsmen weren't very nice guys either, were they? It was all about them. Samson was all about Samson. These guys were all about themselves as well. Did you invite us here to rob us? Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, you hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you hadn't told me the answer. Can't you just hear it? Be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Danielle's like, yeah. So she's going to do everything she can to get the answer out. I haven't even explained it to my father or my mother, so why should I explain it to you? So it kind of tells you what kind of a husband he is too. So he's a terrible husband, he's a terrible son, just not a very good guy. And to the point that his wife has been threatened to death. But what does he do? She nags him and he finally caves in. I'm just going to leave that right there. So Jeff said, yep, don't say a word. So before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? So they answered it. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. Wow. So little locker room talk there. He's pretty straight to the point, right? Yeah. So then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their belongings, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he went up to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to the friend who had attended him at his wedding. Whew. So things just aren't going just real good for Samson, not going good for his wife. Father's giving her away to somebody else, and it's just wasn't a great wedding at all. So later on at the time of wheat harvest, so he's gone for a whole season. He's gone. We don't really know what he's doing. I have an idea, but we don't really know what he's doing. Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, "I'm going to my wife's room," but her father would not let him go. How do you think the wife would have received him? Probably not very well, right? Not at all. This is quite the soap opera. It really is. It really is. Yeah? You don't think that would go over very well? Maybe not very much forgiveness in the future. Yeah. Oh, okay. It doesn't say the heifer. No? Okay. That's good. That's good. Yeah, don't put the heifer in your phone for your wife's ringtone. That just doesn't work well. So Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." So he went out and he caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. I can't imagine that. And I looked it up. Accuracy of the Bible is absolutely accurate, but sometimes it gets misconstrued in translation. But there's still foxes, and that could also be translated into jackal, which is a wild dog. But they have both in that region. But can you imagine? I mean, we have a couple of foxes at our cabin, and we don't see those things. They come out at night. So to go and gather up 300 of them, and they're fast, and they've got sharp teeth, and just foxes are not, they look pretty, but they are not cool. They're very destructive. And it would be really tough to gather up 300 of them and then tie their tails together, put a torch on them, and run them through a field. Now, I can see them running through the field. I can see how that part of it worked. But for Samson to be able to gather them up and actually put torches on them and send them out, that is a huge, huge feat. The Philistines asked, "Who did this?" They were told, "Samson, the Timonite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his friend." So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. So these people are terrible. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. Pretty amazing. So he's a judge, right? And so what was God's intent for judges? For what? Yeah, discern right and wrong, but also to take care of the Israelites too. They didn't have a king. God didn't want them to have a king, but he instituted the judges in order to really do his work and protect them. So was Samson doing God's work here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I did. Right. 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 So I agree with you. I think he's doing God's work. But he's taking it, in order to accomplish that, he's taking this upon himself. He's taking it very personal. I don't really think he's got God in mind when he's doing all of these things. He's doing what God wants him to do as far as accomplishing to start freeing the Israelites from the Philistines. but it's all personal. It's all about Samson. It's all about him. So he's got this superhuman strength that God has blessed him with, and he uses it for vengeance. He uses it to basically get revenge on the Philistines. He's doing it for revenge. So then 3,000 men from Judah came, and they're wanting to just hand him over to the Philistines. And he tells them that they can bind him, but that doesn't work. So that little ruse didn't work for him either. Then we go on. Let's just pick up here in verse 11. And 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have we done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." So there's the revenge. Blah, blah, blah. They said to him, "We've come to you to hand you over to the Philistines." Samson, "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." "Agreed," they answered. "We will only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you." So they bound him with 2 ropes and led him up from the rock. As he approached Lehi, which actually means jawbone, the Philistines came toward him shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Wow. Can you imagine one guy killing 1,000 men? And they were armed. It's not like they kept coming at him. I mean, I can't imagine this battle. Now, I can imagine a jawbone as a weapon. I don't know if you've ever seen a jawbone of any kind, but most of the time, they've still got the teeth in them, and so the jawbone comes up of a donkey. So he would have a handle, so swinging it, and using it as a weapon, that's probably something that was very viable. But to kill 1,000 men, that's just an amazing thing. Then Samson said, "With the donkey's jawbone, I've made donkeys of them." It's all about him again. "With the donkey's jawbone, I've killed 1,000 men." When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was called Ramoth Lehi, which means jawbone hill. So, because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, "You've given your servant the great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Wow. Was that a gracious prayer? He's talking to God the way he talked to his parents, without any respect at all. "Okay, you've given me this feat. Now I need water." So a very selfish prayer is what that is. Very selfish. It's all about him. And then he goes on. When Samson drank, his strength returned and he revived. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. The next part of it, he goes to and he meets Delilah. He goes, "One day Samson went to Gaza where he saw a prostitute." So again, we know he loves women. Went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told, "Samson's here." So they surrounded the place, lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, "At dawn we'll kill him." So why are they after him? Yeah, he killed 1,000 of them, right? What else did he do? He burned up all their fields. He burned up their olive trees, all of those things. So he is definitely an enemy of the Philistines, and they want this guy dead. Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and he took hold of the doors of the city gate together with the 2 posts and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. That's another huge thing. Gates were much different than what we have and think of gates now. I can take a gate, a small gate, and I could carry it to the top of a hill. I don't think I'd have any problem with that. Logan, you could do that, right? Probably so. Yeah, but these gates, the gates to the city, they're big. They're fortified. There's gates on cities to protect them. So these things are huge. So this, I think this gets overlooked. We don't hardly even teach our kids this. It gets overlooked a lot. This was a huge feat of strength for him to be able to do that. So that's one thing that gets overlooked. So God continues to give him the strength. And I think he puts that there to show, again, the kind of strength that he bestows on him. But then he meets Delilah. And so the Philistines want to know and want Delilah to get to him and find out, man, why is he so strong? So 3 different times, she asks him. He doesn't tell her the secret. He's so prideful. I think he just thinks women are just insignificant, that he is so much smarter than women that he can just tell them anything, they're going to believe it, and that will be the end of it. I think that's what he feels about women. So he's just kind of toying with Delilah here. Tell me the secret of your great strength and how it can be subdued. She tells him cords. A piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame, so the secret of his strength was not discovered. So he says, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh thongs that have not been dried, he'd become weak. So she said, okay, I got him. Ties him up. So I always kind of had this picture like, okay, she's meeting with the Philistines. We're going to be in this big room, and you're going to hide behind that tapestry, and you're going to have the little thing over, a flower pot on your head. And when I tell you, you're going to all jump out, and you're going to get him. That's kind of how I've always kind of pictured that scenario. But that's probably not how it was at all, is that she had this plan, and over a day or two, they would talk about that plan and come in and try to get him. So it wasn't, I don't think it was like the Geico commercial where Jamie's going across the road and says, it was me all the time. I don't think it was that at all. I think that there was a definite plan of attack for each one of these episodes. And so this happens 3 times, and, I'm sure they're looking at Delilah like, you can't accomplish this. It's just another time where you've let us down. But finally, Delilah gets him to tell what the strength was, and it was his hair. They cut his hair off. They subdue him. They gouge his eyes out and take him and put him on a grinding wheel. So the grinding wheel was normally woman's work. They did everything they could to humiliate him. And then they kind of think, we've got justice. They kind of forget about him. His hair starts growing back out. They want to humiliate him some more, so they have a big party basically, and they want him to entertain them. I would have liked to seen that. Does he come out and just dance around, or does he bench press? What is his entertainment? It doesn't say at all. I couldn't find anything, but he's out there to entertain them. But anyway, he ends up stretching out and breaking the temple down, kills him and the rest of them. But I wanted to look at this prayer. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, O sovereign Lord, remember me. O God, please strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. So, was that a prayer in sincerity to God, remember me again? Or was that a prayer so that he could get revenge? Which was it? What's that? Yeah. It was all about him. So that never changes. That never changes for Samson. He does God's work. He did what God told Mom that he was going to do. But still, he died prideful and selfish. That was a selfish prayer. He wanted the revenge. So what do we learn from Samson? And also, he's the only judge where it doesn't say that at the end that there was peace that followed his time. The only judge that it doesn't say that. So what can we learn from Samson? Pride can get in our way, can't it? I think that's one of the things that we really have to think about. One of the things I think that if we're teaching our kids, be careful who you choose for a mate. I think we ought to incorporate that into this story as well. Be very, very careful who you choose as a mate. What's that? Yeah, and friends. Absolutely. Absolutely. Treat your parents with respect. There's just so many lessons in here for all of us. And one of the things that I think that I want to close with is that God always has the plan. And that seems to be a recurring theme in every one of these stories. God always has a plan. And in this plan, he was using somebody that wasn't so great to fulfill his work. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes I think we need to realize that. So, I'm out of time. We'll talk about this a little bit more next week, and then we'll get into our next story. Thank y'all. Appreciate your attention.